See someone online.
I don't know why the course lost them.
Exactly. So a glitch in the system?
Probably.
Okay. Getting free credits. Very nice. All right. It's even recording. It's scheduled to record. It's a good thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Beautiful. Good morning, class. My key talk on wildlife management. I hope the course is in line with what we expected. It's very difficult for over 40 people come in a class like this after training for 4 years on wildlife and management or policy. Not have a pre-conceived idea of what the course is supposed to talk about. This is basically an eye-opener, but at the same time, I want you to be able to pinpoint a specific application as close as possible to reality, where you know the details of management and some what I'm going to call case study. You're sharing your lab assignments and you're providing information for the wildlife given species for Ontario, and then your roles are going to go into the science of it. I'm bringing my part into the realm of wildlife management. Big. At the same time, if you were to apply for a job in an interview in Australia for managing kangaroos, you have to recognize that you're Canadian, most of you, all of you. So that means you know the Nordic environments. Therefore, most documented are on the handful of species. So we know them already, and it's known around the world. The moose, the wolf, all these stories are classic. They're big story of wildlife management. We can't go around it. So you're bringing to the table in Australia something extremely important. They've never been to Canada. They don't know what it looks like. So it's worth it. But at the same time, I want you to be able to talk about some idea of management in our region, right? So my job is to go worldwide. Your job is to keep in mind that you're Canadian. So definitely, if you want to study turtles or amphibians, this is not the place. Of course, lots to learn, but I'm saying in terms of the wildlife management applications, definitely poison frogs, which we don't have, is a better shot. Costa Rica for birds, you walk a kilometer, you'll see 200 species. It's one after the other. I just walked along right here and I saw 20 birds that were all doing out of it. So I think this morning what I want to do is set the basis on, set the perspective on how Canadian we are. So I'm going to highlight the long classes of vertebrates, the ones that I know, and because I'm Canadian also, and that's what you bring to the exam. So definitely at the 4th-year level, I would ask for knowing that a family ends in a DAE, right? Okay. And so on. So if you have any problems with that, the taxonomy, let me know. But basically, you have it's straight memorization. I can ask for all of them, but I want you to bring to Australia some fancy words that classical art today for given wildlife program. Not all of them. This is lifelong learning. I'm still learning, and there's so many places I haven't seen that there's so many families I haven't even approached. So we do what we can, but I need to know you leave the course with some handling of the taxonomy, because it's important to know that a wolf belongs to a candidate. Because if you don't have the information on the gray wolf, you jump on the next twin species, the closest relative, for example, right? So the family becomes pretty important. And of course, some orders as well. That was my pet talk. Get too excited. And then you check every step of the way, see where I'm making a mistake.
You're good right now.
No, but I can't access my part. And minimize, I guess. This. This. That's not. Okay, so I see something like 51 slides. So in your at the exams, try to summarize this one chapter into one. So it's sort of a recap for many of you who some names will be very familiar. All the better. It makes it easier midterm. Names of orders or families, all better. You start with the easiest one, and then you add to them. Because it's 4th year level, I'm not asking for one name of a family. I'll probably ask the list, and as we go, I like what's expected. So we've seen the definitions, and again, very strange because in your mind, in my mind, we have a sort of a clear definition of wildlife. Right away, I don't know. I mean, why don't you scream out loud? Let's do group therapy. Who wants to scream the first name of wildlife that you can think of? If you go Komodo dragon, you're just a weird person. Anybody? What comes to mind? I want to know. Wolf. Wolf. So the next one would be
Bears.
probably right. So that's our perception. It won't change, and it's valid. It's valid, but it's just very narrow-minded. Let's keep an eye out for all pants. So when you go into Wikipedia, who wrote that page is so far so good. What I've seen on Wikipedia is valid. That means I look into my group, the weasel, see who wrote that damn page, and it's good. And I know the references and so on. So at least I know some serious stuff is in there. So it's not a bad starting point. If there's no references at the bottom, or if they cite websites, don't trust it. It has to be a textbook, it has to be a book chapter, it has, you know what I'm saying? So the text depends on what they cite, their own sources. So it's a bit variable, but simply because they pretend to know about, because they want to give the reader something, like, oh yeah, the koala, this and that, but actually there's no information, but they won't say it. Hey, it's known, but it's one paragraph. All right. So other groups are really, really well known. So my point is, wildlife management can be defined many ways. So if in an interview you're being asked, what is wildlife management in your mind? You're gonna say, well, it's very varied, depends what you understand by wildlife. So as a Canadian, you think moose, wolf and bear. And it's predominant, it's right there in your face like every day. And other places, of course, the koala, we were aware of the koala, even as Canadians. So yeah, because it's worldwide, right? Same for the whales and stuff like that. But otherwise, you have to open your mind to So the definition depends where you were born. That's as bad as it is. So this is why you have definitions plural. I don't need all of them, and I don't need a philosophical debate on that. I just want to point out that if you and I, we stick to one definition because we recognize the importance of Canadian wildlife management, North American. Besides, it's way more documented. Therefore, most commonly you'll hear wildlife say, "Oh yeah, it's birds and mammals." Not forget the rest, right? And fisheries, they're a bit racist. They think they possess the world, and they do. Sure, they got the cod and they got the tuna, so I need my tuna can. But the science of fisheries is somewhat different. The fishes are different. So, for example, the schools that we see is very common. Whale knows that. All right, so that's why you see living things, very inclusive, right? Non-domesticated is very inclusive, and then we're going to come up probably with our own definitions. Once we look, say, into fishes, and I look at what's highlighted or bold, this is our contribution to the world. Wow, exciting. So basically nothing. No, just kidding. So the lampreys, dominant. The sharks are dominant. We have a few sharks towards the St. Lawrence, not in Ontario, unless there's a freshwater shark that I don't know of. Then the sturgeons we have, and then look at this group right here, and I'm going to detail this a little more, just to give you some vocabulary to bring to the exam. Again, it's more listing than anything else. So this, I don't see much to bring to the exam. This is too much of a high level. It's too far away from a given species. So I want to boil it down to the lamprey is 38 species. So I didn't mention the number of species, but here's 38, here's and then 600, and then suddenly 28,000 in one group. So very unfair, still exists. So let's start with what I intend to do is I'm showing, textbook material, the classic introduction to a given story on that. Something that's documented. Lamprey is really well documented in the area. What's the problem with the lamprey? Quickly, and that's sort of the background ecology that you need to know about lamprey. What is it? It's so bad. Oh, I forgot to mention it's bad. Yeah. As far as I know, it's not desirable. So, like 0. Anybody? Anybody know their lamprey? Yeah.
They get attached to boats and then end up in waterways that they're not supposed to be in.
Yeah, well, that's the human's fault because they move their ship across areas where they shouldn't. Yeah, I'll show you in a second, right? Welland, right from that area. There you go. You know the canal?
Yeah.
There. So it's textbook material everywhere around the world. They want to cite a problem of invasive species. They'll talk about the opening. The other ones, but this one is freshwater canal. It's special. That the Great Lakes are unique in the world. That become 5 lakes connected by this narrow piece of land, and they were punctured to let parcels through. Sure. So it moves up the water, so it's invasive. So apparently it's successful. So it doesn't tell me what's so bad about it. What if I want to go fishing at that with my son and go some lamprey? Anybody? Takers? No. What's wrong with the lamprey? Hey? Ugly is good. Ugly is good for sure. Yeah, yeah. Although people go for eel. Delicacy, and it's not much more. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So anything else? Okay, so it multiplies to overabundance. You see them everywhere, right? Overabundance is a good answer. Thank you very much. And ectoparasite is good to mention. Ectoparasite, and you got the answer. Then I could go into what's an ectoparasite, but that's more second year material. So the word parasite is not very good, is it? Right? We know that it's parasites on other species, and it happens they parasite on powerful species such as the salmon. We go into the salmon, talk about the salmon. Around the Great Lakes is phenomenal. Hunger Games existed. They went to fisheries, all the cities around all the Great Lakes, in Michigan, everywhere. The First Nation are huge around the Thunder Bay area. They survive on fisheries as well. We got rivers. Anybody from Manitoulin around here or in Manitoulin? Let's keep it, yeah. So salmon is running up the rivers, and same on the French, I believe, around Georgian Bay. If you have, if they're all punctured by lamprey, your fish has not grown as better, or some have died from it. Parasite is not supposed to kill its host, but it's really a pain. So you pull your salmon, and it's got something like this attached to it. You'll see videos of emergence of lampreys, so they're bad. They like shallow waters, like where the salmon is going to go, and they leave their eggs. The eggs stay in the sand for 3 years. Your salmon comes up the river, just do good citizen, lay some million eggs, and it happens there's an emergence. Anybody? Emergence is good. That's an insect usually. It's when synchronized molt of some sort. So they go to a metamorphosis within 24 hours, and they all come out of the sand. So that's on YouTube. Been done in the aquarium, but you can see those things sitting in the sand for 3 years. Nothing seen, all good. Jerry, we're good. We can lay our eggs, and suddenly it just pops out from the ground in millions. So lots of attacks on your salmon. That could probably a very bad year for salmon. So as it's been mentioned, so the lamprey is invasive. So the fact that it's parasite, I mean, if maybe in the ocean it's all good, but in the Great Lakes, not so good. This is the Welland Canal right here. I believe, and my geography is terrible, so I'm gonna say, oh wait, I know it's down here somewhere. Yeah, so it has to be down here somewhere. One of these right here, right here. Nothing wrong with the canal. I just want to mention that there's plenty of animals who don't use it. It happens that this one travels really well on ships because it's sucked onto the hull, and then it's super adapted for the Great Lakes. And there's no predators. I don't know who they are, but this animal is really prolific, overabundant, and invasive. So you got these words down for a case study of the lamprey. When we get into wildlife cases, I'm going to stall on some cases and try to come up with at least a history, some numbers to see what we're talking about more precisely. Right now, I'm trying to give you the overview. So everywhere in the world, you can talk lamprey and people will have the same reaction. Well, it must people like it. And that animal is really prolific. If you give it a chance. The rays, I don't have much of a story. I'm sure that somewhere else in the world, you'd be teaching near the coral reef somewhere. I'm sure you'd be discussing management of these species all the time, correct? So keep in mind that coral reefs are often localized, except maybe in Australia where you have a huge coral reef, but otherwise there are always pockets that are in this either by communities and little agencies. So it's not worldwide. So you wouldn't bring too much information from this course from me on rates. I read somewhere that keep in mind the educations have the job in wildlife management. You have to educate your people. Say, oh, I didn't think I could take rhinos, you know, something like that. And you say, Jerry, I can't eat Jerry, don't take rhinos, right? So could be the same thing with race, but I think there's probably harvest somewhere. I'm thinking education through what they call touch ponds or something like that. Going to zoos, it's a new activity for young kids. Pet some race in a basin. You're targeting the 5 to 6 year olds. It's half the battle because when they grow up, they'll be familiar with the animals. So write it down. Education is part of the job. That's all I gotta say on these guys. Because of course, to look at the number of species, looking at 600 species, it's very sad moment here to teach this in Canada for sure. Same for sharks, 500 species. We all know the spectacular case or spectacular shapes, but otherwise, it's a case by case I've read on them. But when you look at original studies, leaving from Google Earth all the way to the point of Spain, and then there's 2 points on that, and so on. So it's very local as well. So I'm sure Mr. Bolton would come up with a statement and say, why are the sharks in trouble when we're, as Canadians, not doing much? It's because of this. And you're right, Matt. It's called Tragedy of the Comet. I'm going to write this down. You're going to impress me. Called Tragedy of the Comets. This is something, it belongs to philosophy, so we're not stalling on this. But it's very important. It's the fact that we're collective users. Well, we don't know what the next person is doing on the moose. So if you kill the moose, what if everybody's killing us at the same time? Right? But you still don't know what's happening. It's called tragedy. You're sharing a resource. So quick answer at the exam. It's about sharing resources. But realize that no, right now, if I'm harvesting martin, someone's going to get back is doubling the harvest. Right? So tragedy of the comet. So in other words, you manage bobcat in Wisconsin. You don't know if the next state is doing something bad, cutting down the tree, the forest, or damaging or even reintroducing. I mean, we do our best, but not everything's known. So same thing for the sharks, especially the sharks, because they're in most often international waters. Therefore, they belong to everybody. That's the sadness with the ocean. It belongs to everyone and no one, correct? So you can dump your sea-doo, your jet ski, and somewhere you'll melt. Florida has been dumping batteries, car batteries for the longest time. They sink buses because they don't know what to do with them. They don't want to have a landfill. So you can just imagine. And I have traveled the world, but I mean, off the shores of Japan, I'll bet there's a few ships that are filling down. Tragedy of the commons. So globally, you're looking at, this is the, sorry for the bad display here. So this is the global catch here in 1,000 tons. from 0 to 700, the peak at 600. I read this as 600,000 tons of sharks. The point is, the number itself is not important. It's massive, but it's global. Plus, it's that drop because I'm sure there's some error on the estimate anyway. Very good one in there. And I still recognize that there's been an increase since 1950 all the way to 2000. Of course, it's bringing the world around after the famous movie. That just gave your age, as if Jaws. Terrible movie. Yeah. So people got scared. It was towards harassment, persecution. Oh, shark, shark, shark. You know, and you shoot the thing. And then, meanwhile, you got lower left. You got people making soup, shark soup, because they have special gas. This is the delicacy. And that won't stop it. That's how the planet who's think that shark soup is the way to go. Not us. So keep in mind, an open mind. So when you're doing something to the sharks, you're, you know, helping just a fraction of the entire ocean. So that's one of the stories for sure. I've been talking about persecution, harassment, and now write down the word public opinion is extremely important. Public opinion is what you do on a Saturday after a few beers. Are you shooting the shark or just looking at it with binoculars? It's your personal attitude as an individual, and you just have some cement that the next guy's looking like. That you're not shooting the thing, because if you have the reflex to shoot, the chance that the next guy has that tendency as well. There's something in common. Tragedy of that common. All right, so I don't have any more details on so now notice that it looks massive at 500 species, because compared to mammals, that would be a bit large group. But in fishes, no. So your bony fishes are where the stories are, because it's 28,000 species. And you can guess that's just a rough estimate. I said the word estimate, we don't have the exact. Even if we have photographs of deep sea fishes, still don't know if it's one species or two species, the number will fluctuate. So let's not go too crazy. The array of specialization is massive. So they're really successful right now. So there are sturgeons, even we have it right here, the lake sturgeon, phenomenal. Matchment or not, I don't think so. I think it's a curiosity. I think it's well protected because it doesn't catch the line too often or the net, because it's right at the bottom. How long does it live? Village. Anybody? Long? How long does it live? Like, there. Give me a call. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. But you think they lived 1,000 years? Hey? No? So, what's your opinion? So if left alone, what's the biggest lake in the north near Thunder Bay? Anybody from Thunder Bay? Lake of the Woods. You look it up on Google Earth, it's absolutely massive. So therefore it's very deep. Therefore, it's plenty of space that haven't been fished. You will find the 100-year-old sturgeon. Not in missing because it's been angled, so therefore maybe very big sturgeon are gone. They're the Ottawa River, but it's different. Not too much management. The eels are being consumed for food around the world. Montreal had a case of the early city lived on eel because they migrate. Before here and mention what kind of migration they're doing. They're doing a migration, let me see. They're doing the opposite of the lamprey. So the lamprey comes from the sea and it wants to fresh water. Leads from salt to fresh. That's the lamprey. And I'm going to give you a hint. This is called, therefore, anadromous. Anadromous is a word that defines exactly the migration from salt to fresh water. Salmon is anadromous. And so it's ANADRO and OUS. Anadromous. I'm looking for the opposite, but the eel doing exactly the opposite. It breathes in salt water. It lays eggs in salt water. It's paint. It comes back to grow. Stages here, so they say, oh, I think I'm going to put a million eggs. So the filter will say, you rush back to the sea. Doesn't belong freshwater. So your eel is coming to the Great Lakes, to Ottawa River, for example. And the young one in Spain migrate all the way to the same one. So on. Very opposite to the salmon. Think about it, so make it clear in your mind. Looking for the word for it. The opposite of anadromous is catadromous. C-A-T-A-dromus. Catadromous. Catadromous. That explains a bit of what happened in Montreal. Suddenly, the river was turned into eels. But you know, dairy, it's always dairy. Sorry, guys. It said, you know, Gert, I'm going to say married to Gert. May, wife, next. So they harvested tons and tons of eel along the shore of the road because it's a narrow where you could see the eel, sorry. So commercially harvested around the world. Historical here now because the population went down, so Montreal doesn't do it anymore. But there was really a time when people, I mean, Boston would come in to get some eels from the St. Lawrence. That's how much that was really sustained harvest. Herring and anchovies, you can imagine that they're harvested. Fisheries, you write down the word fisheries. That means around the world, there's some boats that go out strictly for anchovies and herring, right? So that's their mission, just like you've seen shows on crabs and so on. So they specialize by boat. Definitely, if they're doing fish, they're not doing whales. Carps and minnows don't have too much of a story just for your personal interest, and that's a bit marginal. I mean, I don't want to stick only to the mainstream, so I'm going left and right. In the carps, I heard of Europe, Eastern Europe, using every pond to breed carps. So they actually interbred carps to get fancy carps that were sold to the market and for a good price. That was the family business, was off from the house all the way to the little pond, and they breed carps. That's all I got for you. Otherwise, I can't think of commercial harvest on the farm. So just write it down as another alternative for management. So obviously, captive release could be a problem, you can imagine. But again, as a wildlife manager, if I'm in Austria, if I'm in Poland, I have to talk to the next Slavic Well, I gotta know how it's going. So you have to be aware that exists as well. Catfish, you've seen shows probably on monster catfish being caught, but I don't know of any problems with the catfish. Again, it's a bottom feeder. It's not that desirable. It's mostly a trophy thing, size, and Ontario is not beating anybody to it. So I'm sure you've seen shows where people walk the muddy river just to step on one of those things and just grab it like this. So you're looking at monster catfish. So trophy, write it down as well. That's one of the actions we have. There's sometimes we'll target some species to go for the big one. Salmons, of course, big stories around the world for salmon, just because it's highly desirable. You can write it down. Pikes are being angled around the world. In France, that's all you can hope to catch on a Sunday on any river. That's all that's left. And they're very happy with it if they catch one of those. Yeah. Watch some movies on the rivers on a Sunday. It's not pretty. Half of Paris, that's 10 million people that go out and go bake in the sun by a polluted river, and they hope to catch one of these guys. So when they come to Ontario, suddenly you open a lodge because they want to come back and they want to bring their friends, and suddenly you make a ton of money. You can pay easily $1,000 a week just to be part of sustained harvest of pristine wildlife like we have. And extremely valuable. And think about it, for us, $1,000 to go for a moose. I'll take my pickup and I'll go myself, right? But their trip has cost them $10,000 already. So $1,000 just for the experience of being out in the bush and being in the Canadian West, totally exceptional. Salmon fishing, same thing. Quebec is big with rivers. They all flow into the St. Lawrence. These are all salmon rivers. So ecotourism, big, big, big. People buy their campers, their motorhome, and so on. They park and they fish for the week. They got the waders, they got the lines. They do fly fishing. They do all kinds. They test different rivers. They come back the next year. Very big. Again, we're not looking at commercial. We're looking at individual. Again, tragedy of the commons. You come to river on a Tuesday, you don't know who other people were on that segment the day before, so you could over harvest quite easily. It's a tragedy of the commons again. The ministry is supposed to oversee this, so that's why they allocate so many permits. Sometimes if they want to protect the river, they will actually monitor the access to the river, so they know exactly how many people have been fishing that river. Really fragile. Realize that for a salmon, it's pretty sad. You leave the Lake Huron and you go up a narrow little creek. Well, you're exposed to a lot of things, right? I mean, bears go fishing, we go fishing, bald eagles go fishing, ospreys go fishing. Everybody's on it. So again, a sad moment for salmon. So they are susceptible to over harvest. Absolutely. Historically, I say the dams, the water dams, as humans, that's a new element that I've been bringing to the class here. In terms of action we have on the environment, we build dams, and this is a necessity more and more because of fuel shortages and climate change and so on. Hydroelectricity might be just a passive energy, but it creates a barrier for migration. So write it down. For the salmon, of course, it's a barrier for migration. Therefore, you could kill the river because there's no more eggs at the top of the river. The salmon has to go to where the water is this much. So really, when your salmon is breeding, when the males and females are spawning, you can see the fins that have every animal on it. I'm sure the raccoons will try to grab one. And you remember some of the species cormorant, seagulls, a thousand animals died right there. So quite phenomenal story on this right here. Well documented as well. Realize it's a fish, but we're not out in the sea, we're talking rivers. So this fish is coming to us because we're by the rivers, because we're humans and we need water if it can't. I said it, every city is built by water. There's no, well, except Las Vegas, of course, a millionaire. Which they both extract, get some water in there, but that's just an artificial oasis. It's a desert. So, yeah. And then at the bottom, I have a name that I don't want to see at the exam. Neo story, let's see, Neo Ti. Neo means new and Philly for the fresh fish, the kids around the block, as I say. They're the end result of all the years of evolution. They're the modern fish. In short, they are the modern fish. It happens that it's a huge group. So let's go down a little more. You see in there the variety. Look quickly. So I might mention the name right here, so you don't have to spell it out yourself. I hope you'll remember this is the very late group in the fishes. It's the modern fishes. And therefore, if they all succeed, they diverge in all kinds of shapes, and you got it right there. So in my statement, I'd say, oh, Neo Ti are the modern fishes. Apparently, they're a very large group and they're very successful. What kind of shape did they get? If somebody said they're all shape of a tuna, that's wrong. Because I see the seahorse in there, that's the best experience. Cannibals. We're talking modern fishes, you just don't know what. Right, so you could have a bass looking like a eel, even depending if you're in South America and so on. So, just opening your mind to that group. So the tuna is in there, the cods, plural, the seahorses, perches, and mackerel. They look a bit like this. I tried to pick quickly a few pictures just to remind you that the diversity of adaptation morphologically. Of course, that means they're called totally different. One is a racer, the other one is a cruiser, the other one is a staller. The seahorse is made to stall. It stalls so much that it's dry. Your tuna is the cruiser. That's probably top left. That's the ultimate shape. You have to build in that speed to look like this. So this is the perfect height. That means it travels quite a bit. That means it's in international waters. It's highly desirable for its meat. Therefore, we are not fishing. You can imagine the trouble it is to convince Russia to solve their ships so that Canada can have things. So the story I could stall on cod, for example, which is bottom right. So it's got three fins, three dorsal fins. That's your cod. The story is exemplar. I'm going to say, people say, I'm going down. Somebody's going to scream in Spanish. I don't Spanish. Look at Canada. Because we killed our cod fisheries, and meanwhile, Newfoundland wouldn't exist if it was mentioned that already. I can repeat it forever and ever. It's just as big as a story as summary for congressional damage. Cases of textbook cases of damage to the fisheries. So the story is complex, of course. I'm going to mention a few factors. First of all, we destroyed the habitat. We decided to go big and break the bottom. Break the bottom. We're talking 20 to 30 meters of water. That's it. We're in the ocean, but net off Newfoundland. It is shallow for the longest time. kilometers, there's 20 meters, 30 meters of water. Your crabs, your lobster, everything's in there, including the cod. The cod, what does it eat? Fish. We killed the habitat for the prey of the cod. See how complicated this can get? So I gotta talk to the ships. So again, this destruction of the habitat, including prey and cover. I mentioned that. So by reaching, remove the plant and the prey. Over harvest itself. Goes with market price. Or suddenly, probably I can get a good price. I'll fish longer. The tragedy of the comments, we don't know who's out on the water. What's the solution? So it was a bit chaos. So suddenly Jerry, Mark, and Luke decided to all go and say, never mind, I got my own life to live. I need money for schooling, whatever. So I'm going to each their own until something goes wrong, and that's exactly what happened. So a little too greedy. Let's add to this that I'm going to say two things that are on the positive side to help the cod. First of all, we did what we call a moratorium. So write it down. It's important in wildlife management when things are really serious. It's called a moratorium. M-O-R-A-T-O-R-I-U-M. R-I-U-M. Moratorium. That means a halt on everything. Those like our famous CCA procedure. Like, oh, nothing. So suddenly, overnight, no more boats are leaving the harbor. No more sales, nothing more. So that means, oh, time to listen. Anymore until we know what's happening. So of course, they sent cameras down. They saw the damage. Saw the cows were few and apart, and that they were very small. So first thing, the moratorium is a good idea. Second, they went further and they said, listen, if we're going to reestablish just like our maps today, we go slow. So in reestablishing the fisheries for cod, they established, the federal government established a period of sentinel. So the word sentinel is good to use. And then you suddenly officially, the government is monitoring the fisheries. Instead of taking just the meat scale at the end of the season, the dairy, every Wednesday, you give me a report on what you've seen in your nets, and maybe what's catch and release in it. So really, you're converting the fisherman into a scientific person. It's not there for the fun, there for the data. That's pretty fantastic. So that's one good lesson for sure. The moratorium helped recover the habitat and grow the population again. So that helps. And then there's another measure that federal has introduced, and that's what we call we're not going to call it 200-mile zone. So it's sort of a territory in water. Tough one. You're all between Newfoundland and Boston, Massachusetts, somewhere around there. And you're still on the continental plateau, so there's cod. But the thing is, there's Italy has boats and ships on the water across the Atlantic. Japanese go across the Pacific and the Atlantic. They travel for 3 weeks. Look at the show. These guys are on the ship forever. It's because they travel quite a distance. Therefore, we have had, and we still have every day, ships lined up at the 200-mile zone in order to access our cod from the continental plateau. We're still involved. None of them pay off unless you know where the Canadian Coast Guard goes. How many boats we have for Canada? That's too popular. Therefore, I'll go over the phone and say, Jerry, see the boat go by. He's coming back in the week and going. So they go in at night, they harvest and they come back. So it's technically poaching that cannot be. I'm sure these are going to change. They're changing right now. I'm sure that Coast Guard have. It's a arms race, of course. Coast Guard are trying to catch these better. But the pressure is immense. We're talking. I don't know about the British. Never heard, but certainly Spain, Portugal, the Mediterranean has been a bit partisan as well, so they're coming over here and getting them. See, I could stall forever. I'm told you. We'll never finish this course in time. Never. The perch, I don't have a story except for angling. But if you look at the Ontario species, if that's something that you decided to work on the yellow perch, all the better. This is a very important fish because it's this close to the pickerel. And the best fish, freshwater fish in Canada is the pickerel for me. People will pay more to fish pickerel than they would for any other species. They taste better. They have a white meat. They are more convenient to more people. Some people don't like the pink meat of salmon or trout. So yellow perch, all the better, but it's definitely about, again, tragedy of the commons. So loose regulation, meaning, oh, you've got a fishing permit, you catch a perch, you're okay. The thing is, you look at it in detail, you'll see Ontario allows 50 plus in your boat. That tells you something about sustained harvest. And the answer is, this is almost considered as an invasive species because people want to have lakes with big food. Therefore, industry doing it. People pull out the perch from the lake. So different management perspective altogether, we're looking at almost over 5. Certainly no limit on the catch. Not that I know of. I mean, it could be 50, but I've seen people, even with their kids, of course, it's a nice little fish to catch, and it's absolutely delicious. But I mean, they have a pail, and they just pile up the perch. When you find one, you find 200. So, and there's no harm done. And the ministry is fully aware of the importance of that fish. So therefore, if there was any sign of decline, it would react right away. That was this one right here, the yellow perch. We got a bit of time. It's a miracle. Yeah, oh my God. I don't know how I'm installing this one. I just can't. I'm looking at the groups here. I listed this just for your own information as a reference for later use if you need to, just a refresher on the taxonomy of that group. So that includes right here, including fossils. So of course you're focusing on frog shows and salamanders right there. If we go into just a little more details, and if you want to refer to at least one, listen, I mean, that's not on activity, but we, very important. Right? So even elsewhere in the world, South America, they'll care more about the carrier, for example, than they would on. So in terms of management, something very superficial, but if the word conservation is extremely important, of course, that's a central theme on these animals. I don't know if invasive species, I don't know, but mind you, I got too many toads on my rock, but that's my own problem, right? So, but otherwise, there's no issue with overabundance. If anything, many are threatened. So the toads are right here. This is a group that we have here. We have only one species, but they're plural, so there are several species. We have the tree frogs as well. Down here, number 10, if you can see that. And then I would focus on the Ranidae because this is really Ontario, Canada as well. And of course, the point of this slide right here is to show that we have almost nothing. We're very poor in amphibians. It's just normal, of course. 46, 50 more. Cold, we have snow. These are many, just a few handful of animals survive our conditions. On the positive side, maybe not management by ecology of these species is extremely important because of climate change. Yes. So my topic right here, when we're looking at species that really belong elsewhere, Costa Rica and Sudbury or what happens to them in the winter? Anybody? The auction does background ecology on the amphibians. What happens to them in our winter? Yeah. They freeze. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Then explode.
No,
Crack open.
no, some of them, it's some of them are migrations in the state, but they allow their bodies to freeze.
I don't like the word freeze. All right. Yeah. Torpor, yeah, it's the same idea for sure. So metabolism goes down by, I wouldn't say freeze, but their body goes below freezing point, but they don't freeze. How do you explain it? There you go. So that's all I need to know. So glycol, what you have in your windshield washer. So they shrink, they reduce the amount of water and whatever is left, enough for the cells to survive, so they don't freeze. That's why I insist on it. Freezing is not good for any leg tissue. Otherwise, that's it. This is not the most common. So we have a wood frog here that does that because it lives in the wood. So it's under a stump somewhere in our bowl. So they shrink and they shrivel and then they fill with alcohol. What about the other one? What about the green frog? What about leopard frog? What about spring keepers? They're all in the water. So they go into the mud at 4 degrees centigrade. That's a simple story. Of course, all have their special fees and so on, but typically you'll find them in the bank of water, fresh water, and they dig themselves into the mud below the freezing point. So they're at typically 4 degrees above. There you go. The salamanders, again, were very they're badly represented in Ontario. So I stuck only to one family. If you had to name one, that would be this one right here. This happens that only the big groups, Salamandridae, is going to be the typical salamander group that put the name the same. They're the less I'm going to say the least divergent from a salamander. The other ones have extra adaptations. For example, lung less and all kinds of different adaptations. Size. So we're looking at something very, very small, very typical of a salamander. And I don't have any stories on those except conservation, please, for the exam. Conservation. Oh, yeah. And there goes my mind again. One is question name salamander that's on the hot list right now for Northern Ontario, Northern Canada, and it's also considered as a bioindicator. That means see it, your habitat, and I'm going to give you a hint. Forest, the forest is very healthy. It starts with the blue something. Blue spotted. Good. And that won't be a fill in the blank. I think right down the word spotted. I don't think so. So blue spotted salamander, definitely something to remember. I think in this case it's a very sensitive species. It's an occasional species, therefore is very picky for its habitat. And therefore, if you see it because you have managed to get all the conditions together in one spot, that means that ecosystem is healthy. This is called a bioindicator, and that's really on the conservation side of things, which is all the better. For reptiles, not much better. And what's the reason we have so few of those? Anyway, cold-blooded. Yeah, thank you very much. Cold-blooded, or you might have seen the term poikilothermia as well. So same thing. They don't control their body temperature, therefore they look at the October here and they're not happy. They're pretty sleepy. So surprise, surprise, you're in Canada, but I was in the Yukon, not Canada. It's about 0%. So that's how tough it is for these guys. Again, the same story, and I mentioned that already. I mentioned that for the amphibians, and I'll repeat it again. I mean, the stories about conservation, because we're at the marginal distribution of these species. Therefore, we are part of their habitat, but guaranteed the conditions we have are certainly a strong selection factor. Dr. Liskus, I'm sure you know her. Probably that's what she has in mind when she's comparing Sudbury with West Virginia. They're looking at the same species, looking to see what makes this one tough it out in Sudbury. How do you do that when you're a reptile, if you're a turtle? So special adaptations, or of course you could compare the species and say, why is this species present when the other ones aren't? So what's so special about this one? I mean, talking painted turtle, geographic turtle, and so on, they're pretty common. Lizards, not so much. Here, was there somebody from Windsor? Who was that again? That was you, right then. Oh, yeah. No lizard. No. Okay, so I'm daydreaming, guys. Crocodiles, not so much. North America, of course, I highlighted them because they're important at the world wide level for wildlife. Definitely. So I have to stall on the crocodile, even though they're not beyond Ontario. So these are the turtles, for example. Look at this statement right here. Turtles are second only to primates in the percentage of the threatened species. The percentage of threatened species. That means every species, every second species, if you want, has a problem with its abundance. The next time you see a turtle, you just conserve it just in case it's one of the 50%. So it's really a bad situation. There's going to be a reason. And at the exam, of course, if I stall on the turtles, you're going to, because again, this is technical material. This is really interesting to see why these groups are going down so bad. Of course, it's because we have direct, I'm going to say direct and indirect effects. That's going to stay with you forever. Sometimes you destroy their habitat, that's indirect. Sometimes you kill the animal, that's direct. So habitat is indirect, habitat destruction. Examples of habitat destruction in turtles. Another bonus question, Michaela. What? Just talk to me. What's on the Highway 69? Migration bridge? No.
Yeah, there's also small fences.
Yeah. So migration bridge, no. They have migration culvert. So if you look carefully next time, don't drive so fast on the highway. To the right, you'll see that small fence. My God, what's that for? And that's Dr. Liskus convincing the ministry to shape up the 69 and say, if you're going to build a 4-lane highway, make it nice and modern. That means you bring Americans here and they see this as a barrier. We build the bridge, $3 million. That's for help and so on. And that fence goes quite a long way. All cross fence, holy back money. plus visual obstruction, if you've seen, right? So the little plastic, and then you'll notice that they all merge into specific culverts, so they can go across. Technically, you would say an answer the midterm, why do they have these, and what's the benefit of breaking the barrier of the highway? Anybody wants to try this? What's a good answer to the benefit of making those passages? Yeah.
Reduces the mortality rate.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. But it's not the passages themselves, it's the fencing. You don't need the passages in order to stop mortality on the road. You can just fence, right? So why create those crossovers? Yeah, Matt? Yeah. 2 words. So Gene close, 2 points at the exam. Against to make it a mature statement as opposed to say, oh, to allow the female to vote on it. Gene close. So it's a pond in that old tree. All right. So every animal will count that way. So yeah, they have them. The families I know better. For example, the geo something or terrestrial. Let me find a pointer here. And I'm going to finish in a few minutes here. This I wouldn't know. I don't know this group. I don't know these ones, but I know these ones are very typical. And so are the Amididae, and this is the snapping turtle right here. I see 5 names. If you bring 2 to the exam, that's the end of it. Those are pretty specific. We're into Colonia, it's called, the order. Yep, and we're looking at 2 families. And the soft-shelled turtles as well. And I don't have specific stories on those. Lizards is a long list, so lizards are very common around the world. I went to the Caribbean, crazy, and I like them very much, but we don't have them. So I don't know why, but I stuck to chameleons right here. God knows what happened to my mind at that point. There's gonna be a story somewhere that I'll find. Iguanas, story on iguanas as well. Of course, this is the typical group right here because you see the word lizard in their name. Lacertidae is going to be the #1 group, the most common. So in other words, you see they're called true lizards. So you're, what's it called? The pet shop one? Oh, that little lizard that's very common.
Green and nose.
Gecko is after that.
Green and nose.
Yeah, a nose, thank you. A nose is very common, it's just smaller than the gecko. So yeah, but you're right. Both of them are not part of the true lizard, the typical lizards. You can imagine that, for example, Australian lizards will have their own families that I don't know a thing about. They're absolutely fantastic. Monitor lizards, we have to talk about them because they relate to turtles. You remember that? Maybe, maybe not. That's why I'll mention it now. Hopefully I find some paper on it. Recent paper, that's what I'm going to do. Chapter. But monitor lizards are perfect size to eat eggs, and they like turtles, and turtles like beaches. They all join on the beaches, and it's pure massacre. So what do we have locally that is going to go for turtle eggs? Raccoons, right? Raccoons very good, and skunks, yeah. But they're walkers, and once they find an egg, they'll find 8 in that pocket, and guess what? Sight is good, therefore the next turtle has just later eggs next to it. So therefore it's 30 eggs when you find one. So monitor lizard does that for a sea turtle. And suddenly this is out of our realm here in Ontario for sure, but it's worth mentioning. Conservation of sea turtles is extremely important. Right? So big topic. So therefore monitor lizard is monitored itself. Just because it's one of the mortality factors. I'm sure reality goes otherwise. I'll bet that there's all kinds of animals that after those baby turtles instantaneously. So, but yeah, interesting. And then the skinks I know as well. So I highlighted those. Pick two for the exam. And I won't spend too much time on those. In the snakes, the boas right here, boidae, the vipers, the Piridae, that should be easy to remember. The main group is Colubridae, so the typical snake, non-venomous, medium size, that's not whirling around, and that's not a cobra, will be a Colubridae. I'm going to say 50% of the species are Colubridae, so it's a family to remember. Lepidae are also venomous. I don't know them too much. So did I mention one family for reptiles for snakes? Simply because already good start. So I'm just trying to consolidate whatever you've heard already on these names. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to finish with the crocodiles. Of course, Cayman, we don't hear too much South American, but alligators is whatever show you're looking at from Louisiana. So Everglades is alligator. Crocodile is eastern, it's towards the right. So they're both bad. The gavials, I mentioned the name just because you might see at some point it's got a fine little beak to it. It's nothing major. It doesn't have too much interaction with people. And it's never as abundant as the other one. So basically, I'm going to say there's two groups to remember: the stories on alligators, and that becomes automatically North America, and the story on crocodile that becomes, I'm going to say, African. Including, of course, North Africa, Egypt, and so on. The Nile has crocodiles, as you know. The problem with these animals, they're everything. I'm going to say they're ugly. They're snappy. They're snarly. They dark. That's not good. They hide. That's not good. God Almighty, they don't have much for themselves, do they? Extremely successful. So why is that? Why is that? Why is give me one reason why the alligators and crocodiles are so numerous? Why nobody finds them? Anything? Yeah. They're 8 times better. Yeah, past a certain size, but you could have high mortality in the young, and you wouldn't have so many adults. So why are they so successful? Why are they so abundant? If the adult, what you're saying is that as an apex predator, the adult is untouched. We're untouchable, right? That's what you're saying. So what? Yeah, Matt. Level up.
Parental care.
Yes. Excellent answer, and that summarizes it because they protect their young. Same idea. Not every turtle does that. Look around and you don't get bit by the mother. But if you approach a crocodile nest, you're going to get bit by the mother. So she's young, carries her young, she calls her young. That's all stuff that we don't see in other species. So that's shared between alligators and crocodiles. Therefore, the survival. I mentioned the survival curves. If you recall it now, that's somewhere in the previous PowerPoint, where the young are supposed to die fast. Well, this one is cute. She should produce 30 young. They should all die like sea turtle young, 90% of them. Yet, out of 15 young, she's going to make me survive 10 to the 1. Pretty cool. And then, as of course, extremely valid the fact that mortality rate in the adults are really low as an apex predator. Scared of nothing. And then there's these stories, and I want to finish on this, and we'll start again. The next course on this is the fact they're aggressive. So aggressive means a threat, direct threat to a human. And there's accounts, and they're pretty interesting. Just see exactly what's happening, what's the details. So already it says that they attack humans to defend their territories. Suddenly they're territorial. Well, not every reptile is territorial. This one is. So it'll counterattack anybody approaching. By mistake, that's a problem. Look at YouTube and look at frogs around golf courses. There's 100 players who keep running away from the pond. Never mind my ball. And they could be taken for food as well. Saltwater crocodile, Nile crocodile, and American alligator are the culprits. They're widely distributed. They found many habitats. They're cryptic. They're a real threat. Just like hippos are, just for being concealed somewhere. So I'm going to stop right here, guys. Thank you very much. Next slide.
Showed up like right on time.